Hey everybody, I just wanted to give a little update on a couple things and so a little casual conversation. Yesterday I spent some time with the great folks at Five Points Fire Company during their cigar and wine fest. It was adequately attended, probably not the best, but not the worst either. Good people trying to do good things, but they enlightened me to a few things that kind of surprised me. I didn't really, not that I dive every day into the world of the volunteer fire companies, but everybody that I would imagine that this is going out to or can see it has absolutely the most respect for the volunteers that actually go in, do their respective jobs per se, and it's more than that. It's love, it's a career, it's everything. But sitting down and talking to some of the people that were there, some of the volunteer force, had me questioning some of the support they actually do get, the real support that they get from the communities to the legislators to the corporations that are in the area. And I have to say that I was surprised, disappointed, I will admit, disappointed at what levels of support come in. So, we're talking about how the stations are funded, who gets what, how much is there, and there's always a shortfall. And of course, with the volunteer force that is almost non-existent anymore, it's harder and harder. A young person would come in and would be expected to get paid, or the question is, how much does it pay? Well, it's a volunteer situation. Volunteer means that it's your equity, your sweat equity with no monetary value to it, unless, of course, that you progress and get into a training program, which is about a year. And then I suppose, because it's, I'm learning here, that the paid positions are done according to staff, how many staff, and I guess what the county will allow or the state will allow in budget terms. And from what I understood, that most of the people at the stations that are full time are paid, which is great. I firmly believe they should be. I don't see the difference between the forces in the city of Wilmington that are there to the volunteer forces in the suburbs. As population becomes more dense, I'm just thinking out loud here that if the amount of people in the quote unquote outside city limits the population is denser or as dense as the population in a city, there should be compensation, benefits and all, equal all the way around. I don't want to get into any of that, but I think that it is a requirement, or it's going to be a requirement from our jurisdictions, from our legislators, to support the volunteer force. And I would say let's get rid of the word volunteer and create a paid situation. I don't know all the ins and outs. I sat down to have a beer and a burger. I don't smoke cigars, so it was a beer and burger and conversation for me on a wonderful Saturday afternoon. But some of the things also that was disturbing was the fact that, there's only so much of a pie that goes around when the budgets are made by the state and the county and where this funding is going to come from. I don't know the particulars. I did not get into numbers per se. But what was told to me was that this pie is divvied up by the activity of each station. Now, that kind of makes sense, because if, let's say, that one station is busier with runs than the other, sure, they would be allocated more because they're probably using more equipment, more manpower, whatever it takes. Volume creates, the activity, of course. And if there's an excessive amount of it, you have to have the equipment and all that goes with it to satisfy the demand. So in cases where they are not as busy with all of the runs, you can see where the imbalance might be. However, that doesn't stop the smaller, less frequent or less active stations from having to deal with their overhead. They still have a building to pay for. They still have their equipment. They still have their apparatus to purchase, to maintain. That doesn't stop. And that becomes, a huge burden for them without the right amount of funding. And you know what? They're still on call like everybody else. I mean, I don't see the difference between being on call in one area, and there are no runs, and there's no calls in the smaller area, and there's no runs in there. So, zero equals zero is what I'm thinking. So the expense becomes greater for the smaller stations than the larger ones, and there's less frequency. So the legislators really don't seem to understand that funding is important. And I know that here in local area, we've seen where the the principals of these stations have gotten together to hammer out budget numbers, and still they come up short. The other thing that kind of disappointed me was here in my area, in the Five Points area, and I specifically was talking about the Five Points Firehouse, station number 17, who've been there forever. I think they might be going on 100 years. I don't want to commit to that because I can't really recall. However, Amazon has come into the area. At the time it was the largest warehouse in the country, in the entire Amazon network. It was unique. It's not spread out over acres and acres. It is built upward. Okay, it's not horizontal. It's a vertical build, and there's five or seven floors. Massive. It's a massive building. It's no more than a half a mile away from the Station 17, and it's less than 4 blocks away from my own home. So a lot of the community fought to have Amazon brought into that space where the old GM manufacturing plant was. GM was there for decades, building model after model. It finished off with the Pontiac Solstice and the Saturn Sky. And when it closed in 2006, from that point on, it's sad. It became like an albatross for the area here. It was dilapidated. The building was still there. Anyway, new blood came in. Local business, Harvey Hanna Corporation purchased it, and then renovated or actually cleaned it up and sold the parcel to Amazon. Well, for the purpose of, let me explain this. For the purpose of Amazon building there, it was sold to a real estate company that Amazon pretty much had good contacts with. And anyway, when GM was there, GM would support the local stations, and I believe there's probably 3 of them: Minquist, Belvedere, 4, Cranston Heights, and 5 Points, all within the surrounding area, and Ellesmere. I can't forget about Ellesmere. So there's like 5 stations that GM would help, right? 5 Points being one of them. So when a apparatus was needed, GM would help fund the replacement. These units cost anywhere from $900,000 to over $1 million plus, so they're not cheap. You just can't go down the street and buy a car or a used car, anything like that. These are specially designed for the purposes that they're going to be used for, so they become very expensive, and they're expensive to maintain. So GM would come in and they would purchase or assist in purchasing these units for each of the stations, which almost kind of secured a rapid response, a proper response with the proper equipment in order to mitigate an emergency. So if there was a fire, it would be out quickly, it would be professionally handled, and the volunteer force was more than happy to assist. Great. So the community gets together over the last 7 years or 6 years, whatever they've been there, to get Amazon to come in. And I specifically was a very loud voice. I was proactive in getting it. But what's disappointing me now is, from my understanding, what was told to me, that Amazon is refusing to even support at a 50% level for the new apparatus at 5 Points Fire Company. That's ridiculous. And I'm disappointed in Amazon if that is truly the case, and that funding isn't coming around. But I will believe that what was told to me was true. they are not supporting the cost even at 50%. So $900,000 apparatus, they're looking for 450. So 450 from Amazon, you would figure no brainer. The community supports it. We all have purchased something from Amazon at one point or the other. And the breaks that they received from the state and the county to get into that, the support they had, I believe it was something like 3 million plus just for office supplies, and just little things. But it's the corporate states buying the company to get into the state or to build in the state. I forget what they call it, but anyway, it's kind of like an incentive. All right, so Amazon had its incentive. It was significant, chump change when you break it out overall, but still, it was given to them. So they can't seem to find a way to help support the local fire company, and maybe even the local fire companies, that if something should happen, that they'd have an accurate professional response. So it's kind of disappointing in that sense. And then you hear about that down in Middletown, the new Chinese lab that is being built in Middletown, that Chinese company, is buying whatever is necessary to the stations in and around its new existing building. Isn't that kind of strange that a Chinese company will come in and offer 1.5 to 1.7, whatever that amount is, in order to protect itself or goodwill to the stations and the community? But yet Amazon can't even give itself, $450,000 to help support a local hall. So it was enlightening, to say the least, about how dire these local fire halls and stations are, from manpower to, budget numbers, and everything in between, and what they try to do to actually survive. It's amazing. It's heartbreaking to hear it, and you look at it from a small business perspective and the community, and you say to yourself, "Well, goodness, man, how do we help? How do we do this?" So, I've made it a point to try and get involved in some way. It's just not myself, but other small businesses and other leaders in the community here. How to rally around something, how to cure it. I mean, the big question is just really how to cure it. I think talking to the legislators and letting them know what shortfalls they're actually going to, will that help? Possibly. Voices make a difference. Focusing in on Amazon and letting the people at Amazon know that, hey, you have a resource here, and you have men and women who are volunteering their time, giving up their time in order to protect your asset. And that's pretty important. Fundraising. How do we help fundraise? What do we do to get them, help them out as well? So these are all things I just thought I'd bring to attention, because I was just so intrigued, and at the same time, it really enlightened with the situation these firehouses go in. And I'm talking specifically, I have not talked to anyone else other than the folks at 5 Points, but I see, we have Ellesmere, Cranston Heights, Belvedere, Minquist. These are all local houses, local stations in my general area, and they may be no more than 3 miles apart from one another. And they're filled with great people who really want to do the right thing at the right time, always. So, I don't know. It was a little Sunday afternoon here that I thought I would just share a bunch of stuff with you on what took place yesterday. And the little cigar and wine event raised $750, which was good. It was, like I said, it wasn't overwhelming attendance, but by the time 4 o'clock came around, or 3 o'clock, they were pretty filled. Seats were full, and cigars were going out the door. So that was good. And hopefully, like I said, it was the second year. Hopefully we get to do it again and maybe build up some more revenue for these guys. Anyway, thanks. Just wanted to shout it out there for everybody, okay? Have yourself a great day. We'll talk soon.